you're building a triangle, but you don't have one at the sides. If you don't know how often people are rebuying or how they're retained, then you're actually missing one of the key essences of how to grow a business. Hey, podcast listener, even if you are alone in your entrepreneurial journey, know that today, right now in your earbuds, you are joined by thousands of entrepreneurs from all around the globe seeking to grow better, more profitable, location-independent businesses. If you'd like to learn more about what we do and download our entire back catalog, check out tropicalmba.com. All right, Ian, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the show, listeners. Today, we are talking about some of the world's oldest ideas and whether or not they have anything to say about our newest ventures. But first, before we take it to ancient Greece, we'll send it over to Spain. España. How you doing, boss man?
You'd think I was on vacation, man. You really would. I mean, I got a nice tan and all this stuff, but the truth is, I'm out here hustling. I just got back from DCX London, hanging out with a bunch of listeners there. Tonight, I'm going to a Junto. Last night, I was up till 4 a.m. on a mastermind call.
Like, what are you hustling? Is that hustling?
Oh,
fraternizing with listeners of the show?
This is living, brother. Like, living. How is it in Austin?
It's great. I'm cooking up a little line for the newsletter this week called, Why Do Billionaires Hang Out in Santa Fe? It's got a little bit of Aspen to it. Santa Fe is like a low-rent Aspen. You know, I am flying to Europe next week. I couldn't end up hanging out there with you for the summer. So I did the next best thing. I tossed the dog in the truck and drove to Santa Fe. So It was a fine supplement.
Is it true that like the tap water heals any ailments that you have there? That and like a little crystal procedure or something like that? What's going on over there?
I think if you're rich and you want to get high, the Santa Fe is a decent place.
Nice.
But if you want like a sanctioned high. All right, Ian, let's get into it. I want to take the show for a moment back to ancient Greece. And I want to talk about a concept of the Platonic ideal. So first, a little background on our man, Plato. And I think it's worth bringing him up because he might be one of the most influential people of all time. He was enormously influential in Christianity, which has shaped Western thought. If you go to study like the Western canon, which is like all the most important books, you start at Plato. And so I'm wondering, does this have anything to tell us about our business? By the way, Plato got famous, or his first big break was being the guy behind Socrates. So Socrates, all he did was cruise around Athens and ask annoying questions of the gentry, right? Ask annoying questions of the leadership class. And Plato thought this was so interesting that he wrote about it. Socrates wasn't into the writing thing. In fact, Socrates thought that writing was like smartphones, that it was going to destroy our brains because we wouldn't need to remember things. Socrates thought like the conversation was where it was at. But Plato's like, you know what? I got to get ahead in the social media era. I got to write this stuff down. I got to retweet Socrates. And that's how I'm going to get my big break.
This is how it always happens, by the way. The band plays, and then someone in the audience is like, oh, if I just tweak this a little bit, I could actually be famous.
Yes.
Meanwhile, poor Socrates like did all the work, had all the big ideas.
That's right. Yeah, totally. As far as I know, we only know about Socrates, who is, Socrates. Everybody knows that, right? We only know about him because Plato wrote it down. So does history go to the victors or does it go to the people who are willing to tweet about it? That's the question you got to ask yourself. Okay, so here's the idea. Our mantra this year has been simplify, focus, and execute. And one of the things I've been thinking about is this concept of a Platonic ideal. So Plato really thought that there's two worlds. There's the shadow world that we live in, which is a mirror reflection of the world of ideas. You can kind of see how this had a big influence on some early Christian thinkers. So we won't go deep into the allegory of the cave and how all this works. Suffice it to say that, when I reference the concept of like a chair, I could say like, well, I'm using that stump as a chair. I'm not saying that the stump is a chair. I'm referencing this idea of a chair that both you and I hold and we communally reference. Just kind of a magic thing, right? Like there's no actual chair up there in the world of ideas, but we both know what we're talking about.
Yep.
Now, this gets really elegant when you break it down to simple things like a triangle. There's this idea of a triangle that we both share, even if there's not like a specific instance of it. And importantly for a Platonic essence is that there's nothing that you can add or take away. There's an elegance, there's a simplicity and an absoluteness to these concepts. And so I started thinking to myself, well, how could you design a business that there was nothing that you could add and nothing that you could take away? That was literally the Platonic ideal of a business. And if we designed it, would it help us to grow them? So that's the setup.
A lot of us think about our businesses this way, Dan. Even if they're not good businesses, I think it's like, I can't take anything away. I can't add anything. This is the way that it has to be. It functions. But in reality, you do have to change something a lot of times if you want it to grow. You have to take things away. You have to add things, depending on what stage of the business you're at and what you're trying to accomplish. But if I'm understanding you right, the question is really, what would be the perfect business? What would be something that you and I could say, this is that type of business, and we could both understand that is the perfect form of business?
Let me say it another way, which is to say that like, if you have a business, it would share something with all businesses, whether it's a stump, a chair, a stool. It has this chairness to it, something that we understand as a chair. Same thing with the business. If you reference the fact that you have a business, doesn't matter whether you're doing SaaS or e-commerce or services, or maybe you're just exchanging money at the lemonade stand, there's something about it that's a business. And if we understood that, maybe we could manipulate it. Once you understand how the angles in a triangle work and the fact that those essences are shared by all triangles, now we can manipulate the angles. We can manipulate it to use it for architecture. We can apply it differently in the real world when we know what its essence is. And that's kind of the idea here. And now, caveat to all this, we've been working towards simplicity, right? We've been working to simplify things in our business. Our motto of the year is simplify, focus, execute. Sweet irony, we're complicating things on this podcast here. But I think simplicity is harder to achieve than complexity. Like it's very hard to boil things down. So in our journey to simplify our business has been a very complicated one, right? It took us a long time to like get a handle on our numbers, to get the right team members in place, to change our mindsets, to think about concepts in a new way, to do cash flow mapping, to do all these complicated exercises to ultimately come out on the other end with a very simple framework for how we think about our business and how we manipulate it. It's the same thing you can think about it in any pursuit in life, like following these diet gurus who at the end of the day, they arrive at the simplest conclusion, which is like, eat less, exercise more. Yet you can go through a long, complicated journey and you ultimately end up at the essence, which is that all diets require restriction. There you go. I mean, like that is the essence of dieting. But we might argue about it for 15 years on the internet about which specific thing to put in your mouth. But at the end of the day, the essence is that. So the question is, what is it for business and is it empowering? So the good news for us, Ian, we've laid out this backstory. We've visited ancient Greece. Now we can come back to America because there is a business thinker who I think has expressed a potential for a Platonic essence of what a business is. And that business thinker is J. Abraham. He wrote a famous book called Getting Everything You Can Out of All You Got. We are going to dig into what this book has to offer, but I read it and thought, man, Jay is talking about the Platonic essence of what a business is. And if you can design your business to fit in this framework, everything looks beautiful, everything looks simple, and we're going to break it down today. I got to mention, by the way, J. Abraham has got, what do the kids call it? He's got drip or something?
No, it's called Riz.
He's got Riz and good drip. He's like gold watch. He's always wearing the freaking suit. like debonair.
Yep.
And his whole story is like, yo, I have been in and out of more Fortune 500 offices than you can even imagine. And let me tell you something. It's all the same. It's all the same. And it's the same thing really Plato was saying, you know? There's an essence to what we're doing. So let's dig into it and talk about what it is. So the setup here is a business is simply exchanging money for value. You give a party money and the other party gets a product or a service. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about the essence of a business. Now, what is that form's shape? Much like a triangle, what are the sides? What are the contours of a business? In modern day Plato, J. Abraham writes the following: there are three ways to grow any business. Only three ways. Again, he is expressing an essence. If anybody in the audience can figure out a way that's not one of these three ways, write us an email. Here are the three ways. Number one, increase the number of clients. Number two, by the way, an all-time entrepreneur favorite. That's the favorite one. Number two, increase the average transaction value. And number three, increase the frequency of repurchase.
I didn't hear anything about likes. Or is that the end?
No.
Can likes be number 4? Sorry, too soon. I'll continue to think about it.
To recap, the essence of how to grow any business, there's only three ways. Grow the number of clients, increase the average transaction value, and increase the frequency of repurchase. Now, what are the implications of this? One of the things that Jay talks about is, when you think of like typical entrepreneurial plan, it could look something like, a marketing plan would be like, we're going to write a white paper, we're going to do a rebrand, and we're going to hire an Instagram marketer. But maybe a more essential plan, a Platonic plan, an Abrahamic. By the way, Abraham, it's a nice ancient name as well, might be, we are going to increase qualified leads by 10%. That's the new customers portion. What's really fascinating about this system, this simple three ways to grow a business, is that the results become exponential. So let's take a look at this. And I've pulled down a presentation on this, which we'll email to subscribers. So the example goes like this. Let's say you have a company that has 1,000 clients. The average order value is $100. And the repurchase frequency is 2. So customers buy twice. Now, that business will do $200,000 a year. Now, say you can find a way to increase each category by a mere 33%. So now we've got 1,300 customers roughly. The price of the product is $125, which is not a big increase. And the repurchase frequency is 3. That same business is now doing $500,000, even though each category only went up 33%. And so now the exercise is simply this. Can you put the practical instance of your business into this simple, essential framework? How many clients? What is their average order value? And how often do they repeat the purchase? And how can you grow each of those three? There's some really interesting implications that commonly come out when we plug our clients' numbers into this sort of framework. The first is that most entrepreneurs think that getting new clients is the best way to grow their business. But when you start playing with the numbers here, like just in the example I just gave, Ian, number of clients goes from 1,000 to 1,300. Wow, we got to get 300 new clients.
It's hard. Probably the hardest thing to do.
Now, let's move on to the next part. Increase the average dollars per sale. We went from 100 to 125.
I didn't even notice as a customer.
I hardly even noticed. Increase the repurchase frequency. We went from 2 to 3. It's not a big jump.
It used to be 2-ply. Now it's 1-ply. I got to use more of it.
That's correct. Yeah.
Right?
You got to buy the insurance policy on it
Correct.
as well. So, I mean, what's really revealing about this is because we've broken it down to its essential system, we're able to see how we can manipulate those numbers to go up. Now, if you redo this math, let me just do some live math here. Let's say that we introduced a 5, 10, or 20x price point product to the entire system of 1,300 customers, thereby getting the total average order value up to 200 versus 100. And that might just mean a small fraction of your total client base paying a lot more for a high level service. Now let's take 1,300 times 200 times 3. We're almost at $1 million. We're at $800,000 in revenue with the same basic essence, the same framework. Now, all of a sudden, we're able to truly put our hands on the levers of growth because, like Abraham says, there are only in any business 3 ways to grow a business. That's it. That's the essence. Forget about social media. Forget about your likes. Forget about your plan to write a book. Forget about all of these things. There's only 3 things you can do.
Yeah, and the example that you gave started with the number of clients at 1,000, the average sale price of 100, and the frequency of rebuy at 2, and we're at 200,000. So with a little tweak, you're at 4 times.
800,000. That's the beauty of looking at the essence of something. And I just think the reason it's a fascinating framework, and again, we'll email this out to everybody on the list where you can like plug your business into this thing. The beauty of this is starting with the goal in mind versus starting with the ready at hand thing that you want to do. I was talking with a kind of like a fresh founder the other day, and they did a very fresh thing, which is when I asked them what they were going to do, they told me all the things that they wanted to do. There's kind of like this hope of, well, I find it really valuable. And so when I do it, other people are going to get on board. And then one day it's going to be worth a lot of money. Pretty fresh way to look at it, pretty green. What we're doing here is we're saying, let's start with the idea. Let's start with the goal. How do we produce this goal in the practical real world? We know we need to increase order value. We know we need to increase number of clients, and we know we need to increase repurchase frequency because our goal is to make X number of value for ourselves, for the world. And so how do we back into that? We start with the goal, we start with the principle, and then we add the instances of practicality, of tactics, of strategy. There's nothing really new here. I actually find this framework extremely empowering because it's so easy to get caught up in the project and forget what the project is in service of. And so it doesn't need to be how you operate every day, but it's an incredible gut check. And again, the reason this is so cool is that this is a Platonic ideal. There is no listener listening to this right now that cannot put their business into this framework. Become a Tropical MBA insider today at tropicalmba.com. It's 100% free. You'll get access to some of our best business building resources, templates on everything from quarterly plans to budgets. We even have monthly giveaways, and you'll get a free copy of our book outlining exactly how you can build a multi-million-dollar exit. All that plus a weekly email from yours truly. Join the fun over at tropicalmba.com.
Here's what's cool for me about this, Dan, is like you said, every single business can conform to these constraints. And through these constraints, I think you're going to find a lot of freedom and flexibility to do the things that you want as long as it moves the needle towards the way that it needs to go. Meaning, oftentimes people, and this is us included, sit down to evaluate your business. You could ask somebody, what's the most important thing in your business? And they'll rattle off 10 to 15 things. Like, we got to do this, we got to do that, this, that, this, that. Holy cow, that's a lot of things. You actually only have to do 3 things. It's very simple. You need to increase the number of leads. You need to increase the average transaction value. but you need to increase the frequency of repurchasing.
Yes.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it. And then your creativity can lie in the plan. But
That's
the
right.
goal stays the same. The goal is always the same. It's these three things. And then the question is, what's your plan?
That's it. You whip out your GPS document. You have your goal, which is basically this could be the high-level business plan for everyone listening, which is we need more customers. We need more order value. So sometimes that means you got to, build your product or whatever. And then we need more rebuys. That you might need a retention. You might need a follow-on. You might need expansion, but you need to minister to that. And here's extra credit. You're talking about three things. Well, why don't you focus on one this quarter? What is your priority out of the three? Plug your business into the framework and say, which one gives me the most leverage? And for a lot of us, it's going to be retention or order value. Not everybody. Some people are going to have great product, very highly developed. People stick around for a real long time. They're doing, hired expansion service, all that. For some people, the minority of people listening, it's going to be more customers, and that's going to be the priority. But for the vast majority of people, it's going to be retention and expansion revenue, and it's going to be order value. And so we're going to need to find ways to focus on those things because typically there's a bigger lever. If you actually think about how a lever works, as entrepreneurs, we're working with limited resources. And the reason we're breaking things down and making it simple is because we need to find leverage. And the beauty of putting your business into this framework is that you can see the theoretical result right away. If we change this value, this will be the sales figure.
Little hinges swing big doors. Getting back to the chart here with 1,000, 1,100, 1,300, just these incremental changes can be multiplicable.
Yeah, one of the things I think is worth bringing up about simplicity is if you're having a hard time putting your business on this framework, you might have a lot of homework to do. That's one of the tricks of simplicity is that it's often, there's a foundation of a lot of details at the bottom. You have to understand your funnel dynamics. It's one thing to say we need to get more customers because we're doing the best we can with order value. We're doing the best we can with retention. Now we got to get more customers. It's another thing to know your customer acquisition costs. It's another thing to know and to have mapped your funnel. When you look at things like order value, it's another thing to have solid bookkeeping and accounting. By the way, there is no financial strategy without solid bookkeeping and accounting. So you just need to know what the actuals are. So that's complicated, right? Figuring out the actuals of a $500,000 business that's been around that could be complicated, but it leads you to this ability to ultimately have a simple idea, which is order value.
Yep.
And so in our case, getting to the point where we can put our business into a framework like this took a lot of work. And I want to point that out that now I think it's possible to napkin it, right? I think everyone should attempt to napkin it and then ask yourself, what more information do you need in order to successfully fill out this framework? But I encourage all listeners to do it right now. This is a simple thing to do. And if you can't do it right now, if you don't know these numbers, it's you're building a triangle, but you don't have one at the sides, right? If you don't know how often people are rebuying or how they're retained, then you're actually missing one of the key essences of how to grow a business. And that's how, these frameworks inspire me because they make it simple. Now, here's another interesting element of it is that it's a really interesting way to empower and motivate high-level staff. Because instead of saying, do this, do that, now I'll take a nap, here's all our big projects. Now you're saying, this is the percentage that this needs to be at, right? This is the number that this value needs to be at. What I need you to be is creative and resourceful and on brand and all that. But I need you to get that number because that number is the essence of what we're looking for.
That's right.
Number is an idea.
Right. We're at 1,000 of whatever, dollars, customers, average order value. That needs to be increased by 15%. How we're going to do that, I don't know. That's the plan. We're going to come up with it together.
Correct.
In fact, we're going to come up with 5 plans in the next quarter. And whichever one works, we're going to stick with that. And then when we need to increase it another 15% in the next quarter, our plan probably isn't going to work the same. It's going to be a different plan. So we're going to come up with 5 more plans. But the fun there is that you have the absolute. You know, it's got to go up by 15%. Now you get to be creative in terms of how you do it.
There you go. So again, the 3 ways and only ways for any business, the Platonic ideal of how to grow a business is increase the number of leads, increase the average transaction value, and increase the frequency of repurchase or residual value. You can tack little stars and asterisks onto those things. But again, more customers, more money when they buy, and more times rebuying. That's it. And can you put your business into that framework? Now, what I want to do is just toss out some extra credit ideas from Jay Abraham, the man himself, Mr. Debonair, Mr. Goldwatch, and I want to see what you think of them. One of his viral ideas is apply your business to the highest and best. This is something he always talks about. And when I think of highest and best, it's like, well, if the essence of what you do is sell, why don't you sell something more expensive? Like, why are you selling the thing that you're selling? Why don't you look around the marketplace and sell something that's highest and best? And this is good advice, I think, for small business owners. And it's also how thinking in essence is can get you away from the particular of your situation, right? I'll just give an example of a person that I know who is a salesperson, great salesperson. Like the moment you meet him, you're like sucked into the vortex of like wanting to spend time with this person. And he used to be a beer salesman. So he would go around and sell beer to distributors. Well, guess what beer is? Not that expensive, right? It's a basic commodity consumer product. So what does he do? He starts to sell AI enterprise solutions.
There you go.
Does he know about beer? Not really. Does he know about AI enterprise solutions? It does not matter. He is a salesperson to the core. The essence of what he's doing is selling. So why on earth, if the essence of your skill set is selling, would you sell beer and not AI enterprise solutions? The difference in terms of his personal income is dimensional. And that is sort of like this idea that Jay Abraham has is like, separate yourself and look at the essence and then replace it to the highest and the best.
Yeah, Dan, I think the hardest part about that is just separating yourself from the identity of what it is that you do and what you sell.
Yeah.
Hey, I've sold beer my whole life. This is what I love to do. It's what I talk about. Of course, I'm the best beer salesman. Now you're asking me to go sell jets or commercial real estate or AI. Like, I don't know anything about that. This is my identity. But the raw question there, again, is like, what you're good at, up level it. And the same thing is true. Like, hey, I sit in an office for 8 hours a day. This other person sits in an office for 8 hours a day. They make $3 million a year. I make $500,000. What's the difference there?
Yeah. Well, you can think of this like if you're in product market fit phase of a new business and say you're connecting people. That's what your business does. It like connects people. And the people that you are connecting are not very wealthy. They don't typically spend a lot of money on this, but the reason you're connecting them is because A, you see like a real market need, and B, you've spent a lot of time around those people. And so like that's kind of your first step into it. I think what Jay Abraham is saying, like, well, okay, do the Platonic ideal, like toss your business in there, figure out what it's going to take to get to your goals, and then ask yourself, is connecting these people, if the essence of what you do is connect, is connecting these people really the best opportunity for that skill set? And I think it gets you separated from that identity of like ready at hand. You can see this with a lot of like services business, right? I'm providing X type of marketing service. Why don't I just take the essence of what I do and do it for people who value it more?
Yep.
Just that simple. Okay, just a couple other ideas that I thought were really valuable from Jay. He believes that most companies, probably because they don't have good numbers in terms of like retention and expansion revenue and stuff like that, they are not aggressive enough on first purchases. And I think this is really fascinating because it shows a lack of understanding of LTV. If you know how much a customer is worth to you, you're able to implement Jay's advice a little bit easier, which is like be way, way more aggressive to get somebody into your purchasing ecosystem. But of course, we can't do that if we don't have solid numbers on what their LTV and retention is going to be. So he has this concept of a better than risk-free offer. If you don't get the value from my product here, you get 110%, and I'll send you this, like that kind of offer. Because if you're, again, building your business around these essences, you're going to know these numbers and then feel empowered to get people into the ecosystem more aggressively. I think the real reason like a lot of us that are listening to this right now don't do this is because we don't know our rebuy retention numbers. And if you're just not completely locked in on that, then it's hard to make these aggressive offers to get people into the ecosystem.
Essentially understanding what your cost of acquisition is. So your cost of acquisition and your LTV.
To maximize your cost of acquisition, right? Like,
right.
You essentially could be like underinvested in either money or bravery,
right?
In terms of making like a better than risk-free offer. People say like, oh, I'm worried about the refunds, or I'm worried about sending the gift I promised to people that I would give them a laptop if they didn't like my service or whatever. Well, if you know your numbers, you're able to amortize the laptops across all the new customers, the retention, the rebuys, and now all of a sudden it makes a ton of sense. So this is why like understanding the values and the numbers and the financials behind these three key growth areas can empower you to get more aggressive on all fronts. The reason Jay Abraham's clients or anybody listening to this episode today can start to be more aggressive and offer those deals, which look scary, right? Because now you're going to have to do refunds and now you're going to have to send the gift and everything, is because we know our numbers. Specifically, we know our retention and rebuy numbers. So we know that if we get 100 customers in, they will on average rebuy X number of times. So now we're approaching an LTV calculation and our customer acquisition cost, which will include some of those refunds and which will include some of those gifts. So that's the basic idea. When you know the numbers related to these essences, you can get more aggressive on the hardest part of the system. The hardest part of the system is getting somebody into it. Like, that's the hardest part. And so what Jay Abraham is saying is, don't make it hard. Like, you need to be aggressive at this point. There's somebody sitting on the sideline. Do not make it difficult. Make it a privilege, a simple thing to get into the system and to contribute to the beautiful triangular growth mechanism you have built. Just a couple other Jay Abrahamisms that I want to toss out there related to this thought, Ian. He thinks that most entrepreneurs are too stingy on how they commission out their salespeople. Why not pay those salespeople, incentivize them a lot more? Because you've got the beautiful system now where you will be getting the rebuy retention expansion.
Yep.
You know that LTV. And so we can invest a lot more in killer, sharky, brand appropriate salespeople. So there you go. That's it. So to summarize, we're talking about the Platonic ideal of a business, and we're encouraging all listeners to put their business into this framework and see if you can simplify it. And if it feels empowering to you, it could very well feel empowering to your team who may want more creative flexibility in how they achieve your goals. So again, the essential and only 3 ways to grow a business are more customers, more order value, and more rebuys or retention. Or you could also say expansion revenue. Again, we're trying to keep it platonic here. I know there's asterisks and stuff, footnotes, but those are the Platonic 3 ways to grow a beautiful, beautiful business. It's like Gordon Ramsay. Every time he like puts a tomato on a sandwich, he's like, a tomato. He says, it's beautiful. I love that. Gorgeous. It's beautiful tomato.
It's beautiful. Freak.
All right, Ian, that's it. I know you got some listeners to hang out with tonight. For those of you on the newsletter, we'll send out the calculator and the framework so you have the worksheets. That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the Tropical MBA podcast.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Tropical MBA podcast. You can go to tropicalmba.com, get access to hundreds of back episodes and all kinds of other goodies. Load up your iPod. That is the cheapest way to fly business class on your next international flight. We will see you next Thursday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.